I probably don't need to start this video off with a long dramatic intro explaining the origins of rage games, so I'm not going to. Everyone already knows what rage games are, whether you've watched someone else or experienced the horror firsthand. Over the years, I've played a lot of difficult games, but I never started playing actual rage games until early last year. Since then I've beaten a fair few, so I thought it would be a good idea to make a video ranking everyone I've beaten. However, just as I started drafting and planning out this video, a strange new game emerged from the depths. A difficult game about climbing. I decided it would be a little stupid to make this video without playing it, because from the trailer, it seemed very similar to Getting Over It, and maybe even on the same level. Now that I've beaten the game upwards of 20 times, I wouldn't necessarily say I was wrong in thinking that, but I was definitely wrong in thinking that. Climbing game isn't a bad game by any means. It's very fun and pretty satisfying to move around, but there are just a few flaws that keep it barred from the peak of the rage game genre. The main one of these issues is replayability. While the movement system for climbing game is great, it doesn't exactly allow for replayability. I mean, just compare the top speedrun for Getting Over It to the top speedrun of climbing game. You can make the point climbing game is too new to compare, which is a fair point to an extent, but it's still hard to imagine there being any crazy new movement techniques or skips being discovered, because the fundamental design of the game is, put simply, too simple. This caused my subsequent runs after beating the game to slowly become more and more boring, and I stopped playing it almost entirely after a little over 10 hours. Replayability isn't an essential value for most genres, but for rage games, it definitely is in my opinion. Just comparing my hours on other rage games to climbing games is proof of this. These replayability issues might not apply to someone who plays rage games casually just to beat them once, and if you are one of those people, you can safely ignore all of my points here. But there's still another issue I have with the game, which is the punishments. Up until the 6th and 7th zones, this isn't a problem, and you can have some pretty tragic falls, but once you land in the 6th zone, it's almost impossible to fall down unless you're immensely stupid. I think the game would benefit if these two areas were nerfed slightly, as they're an insane difficulty spike, but also had more punishments for falling. Overall, it's still a pretty solid game, so I'm feeling a light to decent 7. Next up on the ranking list, we have Jump King. There's something special about Jump King that separates itself from other rage games. In Getting Over It, you can try to recover from a fall by reaching out and catching onto a rock or object. In Climbing Game, you can hold grab to try and slide down a wall instead of falling past it. But in Jump King, you can do neither of these things. The second you release your thumb from the jump button in this game, you are locked in. There is nothing you can do to prevent a fall from getting worse. You can only watch as hours of progress disappear in a matter of seconds, the cruel gods of the world condemning you to another eternity smouldering in the dogged pits of torture and pain that you had once escaped from so. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that Jump King is pretty mischievous. The game features 3 separate maps, each named in correspondence to the smoking hot babe that awaits at the end of each one. These are the Main Babe, New Babe Plus, and Ghost of the Babe. The Main Babe is the first and easiest map, so I'll rank it first. The map starts off very well with the first 2 areas, and in the third one, you can see the first of what I like to call Jump King's signature evil mode chain reaction falls. This whole area is designed to have a gap on the left side all throughout it, so if you fall here, you go back down to the top of the previous area. From here, you're presented with a few very risky jumps that could potentially take you down to the top of the area before that one. This pretty much leads to a chain reaction of falling, and it's one of the best and worst things about Jump King. While these chain reactions can sometimes be more painful than the average 10-minute Rain World session, they are unarguably designed very well for their purpose, and are one of the reasons Jump King is as prominent as it is. There's not really too much else to say about map 1 of Jump King. It's a great introduction to the harder maps, and is balanced very well, so I don't really have any complaints. Overall, I'm feeling a strong 8 to a light 9. Map 2 of Jump King is New Babe Plus, and as you probably could have told from the name, it's a remake of the first map, but made way harder. Each area is a redesign of an area in Main Babe, and most of the time it features some sort of extra mechanic like wind or snow. The most notable of these changes is the alternate version of Blue Ruin, which turns into Deep Blue, an entirely underwater area. The gravity drastically changes in Deep Blue, meaning it takes a lot longer to charge your jumps fully. It's already a very frustrating area, and almost every fall sends you down to the start, but that's not the worst of it. It takes a very long time to adjust to the Deep Blue gravity, and once you finally do an escape, you have to adjust again to the normal gravity in the next and final area, the Dark Tower. On top of that, the Dark Tower has no ground on the left or right side, and neither does Deep Blue. This means that one slip up here sends you right back down to the bottom of Deep Blue, which is very easy to do because readjusting to the fast gravity is insanely disorienting. There's no denying that this is pretty funny, but it's also really, really annoying, and not in the same way the chain reaction falls are. There is one good thing about this area, which is that it prepares you well for the final map. Generally, I didn't really like New Babe Plus as much as the other Jump King maps, though it's still very good. Though I will say that the Hidden Kingdom area features my favorite moment in the whole game. Overall, I'd give New Babe Plus a strong 7 to a light 8. Finally, we have Ghost of the Babe, the final map of Jump King, and it is easily the hardest. The falls in this map are on a whole different level, as well as the overall difficulty of each jump. This map is easily the most I've ever struggled in a rage game, and I think the introduction to the first area is a good way to show just how ridiculous this map is. This area, the bog, has the same gravity as Deep Blue, and it also features my favourite character in the whole game. I really resonate with this dialogue, because I hate women and have no friends. The bog is infamous for being extremely evil, and if you want proof, look no further than these DMs I had with my friend going through it for the first time. Once you finally escape the bog, you reach the Molding Manor, which is unarguably the yummiest looking level in the entire game. The entire right side of this map is a danger zone, and will send you right back to the top of the bog. This is another signature Jump King evil mode chain reaction. Pretty much every single difficult jump in all of Ghost of the Babe has a huge punishment, and these are present across all areas, except for the House of Nine Lives. This is most likely because it features the Lux Maxing Sigma cats. The worst jump in all of this map is easily the one here in Halted Ruin. Just look at the punishment. The final area of Ghost of the Babe is unique because it features an entirely new mechanic, Sand, which is a pain to get used to at first, but it's still pretty cool, except for when you faceplant.
Are you kidding me? On Skibidi, I'm killing myself. Oh my...
Overall, Ghost of the Babe is a great culmination of Jump King, and I couldn't really ask for a better final map, or any changes. I'm feeling a decent 9 to a strong 10 on this. Next up on the Rage game list is Pogo Stuck, Rage with Your Friends. Pogo Stuck is the second weirdest game ever made, with Samurott 1 being first. Nothing in this game takes itself remotely seriously. I mean, just look at this UI, but the game is still really fun. Similar to Jump King, Pogo Stuck features multiple main maps, but there's also a bonus map. There's not much to say about Pogo Stuck's first map, as it's kind of normal and a nice introduction to the mechanics. It's nothing special, but there is a pretty cool secret if you beat it fast enough. I don't really want to spend too much time talking about this map, because I have a lot to say about the second map. Overall, I'm feeling a light to decent 7. Map 2 is where Pogo Stuck gets freaky, and sadly, it isn't exactly in a good way. There is an abominable difficulty spike between map 1 and 2 of this game. You can see right from the menu screen that map 2 is the hardest, but it should have at least 50 more chilies than there are. Personally, I didn't actually struggle too much with this map, as I was waiting for a friend to beat map 1 before I played it, which gave me 50 or so hours of extra experience. Nonetheless, it still took me a while to beat. Unlike the other maps, map 2 is structured completely vertically. You'd be right to assume this would make the falls a lot harsher, but it's done in very unconventional and honestly cheap ways. There's this flaw with this map that I've never wrapped my head around as to why it exists. The core structure of the entire level is vertical, so it should be easy to make natural long falls, but for some stupid reason, the developer added spikes, goop, and this axe. They probably seem like your average Rage game obstacle at first glance, but no. When you touch the goop or spikes, the game takes your character, picks it up, and places it lower. I don't understand why that needs to exist, especially in the thorn section. Why can't there just be rounded spike balls that bounce you down like the spikes earlier in the level? That isn't the real crime about this map though. It's far from it. This axe here may just be the worst thing I have ever seen in my life. This is coming from someone who's endured countless hours of sis vs bro content because of younger siblings. Hitting this axe straight up kills you and drops you right at the start. This is just blatantly lazy. Why couldn't it be a big bouncy hammer like in Fall Guys, the greatest game ever made? Why does it have to reset all your progress in such a cheap way? Keep in mind, I went into this map with a lot more experience than the average player, so for the most part, this isn't a skill issue. I will admit that pretty much everything can be solved with a lot of skill, but that doesn't really make something not bullshit. Everything outside of the axe is really great though, and I still had a positive experience overall. The gravity boost was pretty cool and so was the ending, but because of those crucial flaws, the map doesn't reach its full potential, which honestly could have been on the same level as Ghost of the Babe, if not higher. Overall, I'm feeling a light to decent 6 on this thing. Thankfully, Map 3 of Pokestock makes up for the flaws in Map 2. Map 3 is a lot more open than the other maps, and any other Rage Game map that I've played. There are multiple paths to the end, and it's full of secrets and small areas you won't notice on the first playthrough. It also features an entirely new movement system underwater, which is only used twice, which is kinda weird for how fun it is, but I'm not complaining. The whole map is a very clear improvement from the first two, with the visuals and gameplay being a definite step up. It doesn't feature anything super stupid like the axe in Map 2, but it does have this snake which is still pretty weird. If you fall in this snake's mouth, you get sent to a random spot in the map where there's a hole. I actually can't tell if this makes it better than the axe because it doesn't send you to the start, but it's also just straight up RNG. The final area definitely makes up for this though. It's a huge playground featuring these rings that give you super big boosts and allow for some very cool moves. This part might just be my favorite area in any Rage game I've played, and overall, it's easily the best map as a whole in Pokestock. I'm feeling a strong 9 to a 10. Now there is one more map in Pokestock, but it's a bonus map, and pretty mid. There's really not much to say about it, as it's kind of a nothing burger. The visuals are very boring, and the mechanics are nothing special. It's also pretty unbalanced, with these jumps being way harder than anything else, as well as most of the sections in Map 2. But, to be completely honest, the structure of these falls are the best and most brutal in the whole game. If the gameplay in between the falls was more interesting, and the whole map was slightly larger, it could easily be on the same level as Map 3. I'm feeling a light to a decent 5. You probably guessed that this was coming, but next up on the list is Getting Over It. Getting Over It is definitely the most famous and influential Rage game of all time. Just look at Climbing Game, it's pretty much the same thing. There's a good reason for Getting Over Its success. The premise is very goofy and interesting, and it was the first Rage game to get mainstream attention for this reason.
God damn it, I'm turning the sensitivity down.
It single-handedly inspired the existence of probably hundreds of other Rage games, good and bad, but the question remains, does it still hold up today? Definitely yes. Getting Over It is still amazing. No other Rage game that I've ever played has had a learning curve as satisfying as Getting Over It. The inner workings and physics of the hammer are very confusing and completely unknowable at first, but after playing for long enough, you get a hold of it and can eventually do stuff like this. In games like Pokestock and Jump King, you don't really get the feeling of being completely and utterly lost before mastering the movement. While that feeling is there, it just isn't as powerful as Getting Over It, and the only game that really comes close is probably Climbing Game. Another great thing about Getting Over It are the voiceovers, which is actually annoying to some people for a reason I will honestly never understand.
I feel within me.
Yo, shut up! I just hit my
I genuinely found myself missing him when I was stuck in an area for too long. The design of the map itself is also great, and I have no complaints on that behalf. Even though there's only one map, the replay value is incredible because speedrunning it is very satisfying, and the game actually has an inbuilt timer, unlike another game in this video. Overall, for Getting Over It, I'm feeling a strong 9 to a 10. This next game is very popular, easily bigger than Getting Over It, but I didn't want to include it at first because I kind of hate it. The game I'm talking about here is Geometry Dash. Geometry Dash is an evil-ass game. I'm just gonna say this right off the bat. No game has ever made me feel so hopeless and lost in my entire life. If the amount of rage I've felt towards this game was somehow turned into a physical object and then condensed into one point, I'm 99% sure a supermassive black hole would form and split the fucking Milky Way in half. Thankfully, there is a good side to this game. If the amount of joy I felt playing this game was turned into a physical object and compressed into one point, I'm 99% sure a slightly smaller black hole would be created, because beating a new hardest is very satisfying.
Yes, I beat it! Oh my god, I did it! Holy shit, yes!
Also, hosting the lobotomy contest 3 months ago single-handedly gave me a 2,000 subscriber boost and eligibility for monetization, which is very cool. Aside from that, I'm not sure what else to say about the game. It's easily the most amount of time I've invested in a game, but I don't actually know if it was worth it. I will say that Geometry Dash probably has the most impressive community that I've ever seen. As I've always said, when the GD community isn't grooming minors, they're most likely doing something cool. It's honestly really hard to rate this game out of 10 for me, because I'm still very conflicted on whether or not I love it or hate it. With that said, I don't think I have any other choice than to give it a solid unreviewable out of 10.
What does it mean to really surf a butthole?
I'm smoking on Bhutanese Shadow Garden grown Dark Evil Pack.